Hello, all. Showing 2:30. My name's Bradley Jackson with the Tennessee Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and thank each member that we have of Tennessee's East side congressional districts for taking the time. The Tennessee Chamber, like many of you all, we are working to provide different mediums to communicate out informative content regarding the recent coronavirus and its impact on Tennessee. Today's discussion, we thought, is a really good opportunity to hear from Tennessee's congressional representatives kind of about how they have been impacted and their constituents and communities, and also a perspective kind of from the federal government side as well on their reactions and solutions to the COVID-19. I will say a few notes before we get off and running. I do want to remind you all that we are recording this meeting so that we can share it later for those who can't join us. We are going to go ahead for sound quality. We're going to mute all attendees so that we ask you please, keep it. We'll have you silenced during that. If there's anyone on the media, closed media call, so we ask that you exit the line now. So we will start with opening comments, and we will take each congressman in by alphabetical order. So we'll kind of do a round robin. I'll state the opening question. We'll go Congressman Burchett, Desjardins, Fleischman, then Rowe. And then once you all have an opportunity to make your opening comments, we have Chamber of Commerce's in East Tennessee that will be asking questions. The first question will be Beth Reinhardt, President CEO of the Bristol Area Chamber of Commerce. Second, Amy Nolan, the Knoxville Chamber. And then lastly, Laura Barnett with the Kingsport Area Chamber of Commerce. In addition, if you all would like to ask questions, please submit those to the host meeting, which I believe that's Ryan King. So you all can do that throughout the meeting. As we have time left at the end, we will go ahead. Each of you congressional members, we really want to thank you all for taking the time. I know it's a difficult time for you all. It's a extremely busy time and it's a stressful time, but we really do thank you all for your service and the work that you all have done to help your districts and Tennessee communities. So with that said, we'll go to Representative Burchett. And I guess if you all can provide kind of how what are you hearing from your communities? What's the impact, and also the kind of the federal response to all this? Any that you've got about that?
I can literally hold my phone up to the computer here, and that should work pretty well.
So thank you all for being patient with us as we work through all this to coordinate. I think Congressman Burchett maybe needs to be unmuted. Is that Lauren or Ryan?
Can you hear me?
There we go. Got you.
Yeah. Okay, good deal. Good deal. My daughter left. She's 12. She can figure these things out. I'm a little out of it. Now, hey, I appreciate you all so much for what you're doing. I put my phone number out on the internet, so we've been getting calls from all over. There's a lot of panic out there, but I think the federal government administration's done a pretty good job of addressing all those with the SBA loans and the PPP and everything that's been going on. And the Treasury's been good to get back to us. Secretary Mnuchin and all them have really been excellent, I think, at getting through all this. I had a question this morning, wasn't able to ask, but I talked to Kevin McCarthy just as like 15 minutes ago, his people, and I said, do we have a plan in place for when this is all over with? And because that's what I'm concerned about. The doctors and everybody are doing the best they can, and I would hope it's not going to be a plan where we just hand out checks, and that we would start looking at things like tax credits and investment credit for people that invest into the system, and so to really get the economy energized. That's my greatest fear right now over that, because I believe the doctors and the medical community are doing everything that they can possibly do. But we've been getting calls about everything. You just name it, it's out there, and there's a lot of people suffering with depression, and this of course brings it on. And just thank goodness we're not in New York right now. I wasn't really sure. I missed some of the what you said you wanted us to talk about. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
you. Just a little bit of perspective too. You know, we keep hearing discussions about maybe a more federal action around.
Yeah. There's going to be. I feel pretty firm about that. I think it's what $240 billion is going to be injected out there into the small business community, and I would hope that we could do it without us all having to go back to DC and go through all that again. And I'd hope that our friends across the aisle don't load it up. I'm hoping it's things that we need, and not a bunch of that won't be delayed 3 days before, like we were before with the Kennedy Performing Arts Center and funding for all those things that had nothing to do with this coronavirus situation. So yeah, I'm very confident there's going to be some more money injected. And I think a lot of the concern was that by the time Tennessee got in line, that there wouldn't be any money. And this, I think, helps alleviate some of those concerns. And I hope that new money that's going to be injected into it will get to the folks in a hurry, because I think the system was, it just magnified the problem with the system and what was wrong with the SBA. And I think this administration doesn't put up with many shenanigans. So I think they got into it in a hurry, and they're fixing those problems. And from what the information I got was by next week, it's all you're hearing a lot of talk about there's billions of dollars or hundreds of millions or whatever that are flowing into it. The problem is it's not getting from the banks to the small business because of the guidelines, but the administration, I believe, has addressed those from the conversations that we've had, and the people that I know that have tried to get it are now starting to get there.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman. Congressman Desjardins.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Hello, sir. It's Bradley Jackson with the Tennessee Chamber. Just some opening comments. What you're hearing kind of from your district, especially from the business community, and also federal responses. Looking at the packages that have passed and anything maybe moving forward.
Right. And I just got on the call, so I don't know what my colleagues have already said or mentioned, because I'm sure things are pretty similar across the state. We all participated in a conference call this morning with the Vice President, Secretary Mnuchin, and Dr. Burks and Dr. Fauci. So, probably the biggest take home and issues we're still seeing here in the 4th District is some of the rollout of the small business loans from the banks, trying to get that shored up. Apparently, by the end of today, they hope that things are running a little more smoothly, and it's probably already been mentioned, but people can reach out through treasury.gov or SBA, the Small Business Association.gov, and they have a frequently asked questions site where a lot of the problems people have incurred are being posted and answered. So, we're fortunate here in the 4th District. We haven't had any real hot spots. Murfreesboro is probably one of our biggest. But seems to be the most questions I get coming in are, when will the checks be coming out, and how do we get these small business loans to go through? Most of our facilities are doing okay with personal protection equipment, and so all in all, things are pretty good. We're working on just some little issues, like there's some TVA docks that were closed down, so people trying to get out, maybe on their boat, get away. Fish a little, we're having trouble, so we've had calls into TVA trying to get that resolved. And I just want, the people in my district to know that our office there, more particular for East Tennessee, I know we're going to do Middle Tennessee tomorrow, but my office in Cleveland there in Bradley County, Shirley Pond's there to take questions. Our Washington staff is available to take questions. So I would encourage people to go through the usual channels. We are updating our staff all the time on all the latest information that we're getting from leadership, the president, FEMA, the health department, CDC, et cetera. So, we try to stay up to date, and we welcome anyone's questions, and please utilize our numbers. You go to desjardins.house.gov, get all our office numbers, and we're happy to help in any way we can.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Appreciate your service. Congressman Fleischman, may take us just a second to find you and get to you, but thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Can you all hear me, or
Yes.
are we good?
Yes, sir. We're good.
Okay, well, thank you. I would like to thank my colleagues for joining me on this call. There's no question that we're in unprecedented times. And at a time like this, I want to thank each and every one of you all. Our local chambers of commerce are going to be so important as we deal with the economic side of this crisis. The health side of it obviously has been devastating. I think as a nation, we're dealing with it in a very good way now. We're catching up, but literally with 182 countries across the world being affected by this virus, we're doing the best we can, running concurrent with that healthcare crisis. The economic impact is something I've never seen before in my lifetime. So we are in uncharted waters, as I said earlier today, but I think we're rowing in the right direction. And chambers of commerce are going to be important. My colleagues in the House are my dear friends. We are all working together here in the Tennessee delegation to make sure that the aid is working. Let's face it, we have a situation now where individuals are concerned, but we have a lot of businesses who feel that they are not getting the appropriate response as quickly as possible. But we are seeing on our end a great coordination between federal, state, and local officials. My colleagues and I have a weekly call with Governor Lee and his staff. So we are cooperating, we're working together, but we are getting a tremendous volume of phone calls from concerned businesses. That might be an individual sole proprietor, it might be a small business, a mid-sized business, but we are addressing that. The volume of calls is staggering. Governor Lee told us the other day, they went from 2,700 unemployment claims to 70,000 in 1 week. So I would urge patience on the part of your entrepreneurs, of your members. Let them know that we're all working on this together, and I think we will get through it. Fortunately, on the health side of it, it looks like, and I hope and pray that Tennessee will not be as impacted as some of the hot spots are, like New York and New Orleans. But we're working together, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have. We're dealing with a lot of associations. I just got off with the Tennessee Truckers, but any of the different associations that need help, we're trying to get information out there so we can get through this.
Congressman, we appreciate that. And I know we'll probably have some questions later. Under the Paycheck Protection Act, nonprofits that are C6s were excluded from that, and that includes a number of chambers of commerce and also other nonprofits. But we appreciate you recognizing the work that chambers are doing.
Yes, sir.
Congressman Rowe, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Bradley. Thanks for having this and putting it together. Look, we are, as Chuck said, in unprecedented times, and it's something that we're all going to have to kind of weather the storm here for the next few weeks. When we first were acknowledged that this was going on 6 weeks ago, it seems like it was 6 years ago, but we recognized that we had an epidemic, now pandemic, that goes around the world with far-reaching consequences. The bill we put together, we put 3 different bills together in the House and Senate and passed it, and the President signed into law. One was, initially, we thought it was think about this. So we thought this would be a $2.5 billion would solve the problem, $2.5 billion. We passed a bill, it was $8 billion to increase testing, studies for vaccines, cures, treatments, and so forth. We quickly realized that there were going to be some job losses, so we passed the Family Medical Leave Act and emergency leave. If you had a family member home, to take care of them with the COVID issue. Realizing then, I guess 10 days ago now, 9, 10 days ago, we passed a bill, signed into law, just a week ago, last Friday, went into business, and we tried to do three things. One was to help protect families, and that's where the direct payment will be coming. Secretary Mnuchin said, hopefully by the 15th of this month, that's in another week, that families will get a $1,200 check, or if they're a married couple, $2,400 and $500 for each dependent child. Also, the unemployment insurance was made more robust, so families would be made whole for 4 months, ending at the end of July of this year. And then the lifeblood of our economy, and certainly in the first congressional district, is small business. So that's why the small business loans went out at $350 billion. And I have just got off the phone. I'm on the WIP team, and I guess I know Chuck, some others are on there too, but some clarifications of our bankers I think we need to get out. Literally just hung the phone up. Is that the bankers can use their own note forms, not one that's sent out from Treasury. That was some confusion. Number two, that every loan had to be closed within 5 days. They've changed that to now 10 days. And when does the loan forgiveness start? And the new direction there is that when you actually get the money, not when you apply, but when you actually get the check, if you keep your folks employed for that length of time, then 8 weeks of time, then at the end of that loan will be forgiven for small business. Obviously, we have almost $500 billion in there for other businesses, and I think Tim mentioned this, maybe Scott, that the $250 billion I think will be passed easily, because you're not going to look back 6 months from now and say, hey, we did too much. I think you're going to say you did too little. Now, in my district, right here where I live, Ballot Health has sent a memo out today, which I read, that probably will furlough 1,300 people. And this is unimaginable to me, that we went from 6 to 8 weeks ago. The biggest issue in this country was we don't have enough employees. I guarantee you, if you ask any one of the four of us, what did you hear when you went around in January and February? We can't find enough workers. From that to 10 million unemployment claims that'll be coming out in the next week. That's unbelievable. And in my district, I think of Sevier County especially, which is this Great Smoky Mountain National Park last year, to show you how severe this is. Great Smoky Mountain National Park last year had a record number of people visit, 12.5 million people. And this year they were ahead of that in March. I talked to one business owner that has had to close his businesses in Sevier County. That was 10% ahead of his record last year. And all of a sudden going from that to zero. So that's a challenge we have. And as Chuck said, we'll be on a call with the governor tomorrow to sort of see how do we begin to climb out of this. And I looked at the numbers. I think we've had 114 cases of coronavirus. And where we are up here in Northeast Tennessee with Ballot Health, there are 13 people in 21 hospitals that are hospitalized for COVID-19. Well, we've got to figure out a way to open our businesses back up in a smart way. I think to continue to use social distancing, and I want to brag on the people here. One of the things that they've done is they've really taken to that. And I think it's helped us in this area. We're not all cram packed up together. We live in a more rural area. Maybe not so much Tim, and maybe not so much Chuck and Chattanooga where it's more urban, but our populations are spread out a little bit. So it's actually helped us keep our numbers down. I don't think we're going to see anywhere near the consequences of that you've seen in New York, New Jersey, New Orleans. And I think you're going to see a much better response. And with that, Bradley, I'll stop. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate what the chambers are doing. And any questions that we can answer, or things that we can help you with, please contact our office.
Thank you. We appreciate it. I believe we're going to Beth Reinhardt for the first question. Beth?
Good afternoon. And Bradley, thank you for putting this together. And to each of the congressmen who are on the phone, on the call, I just want to first and foremost just give you a huge thank you for all that you're doing to support us. And I know you're working tirelessly, just as we are, to make sure that we all make it through this. So thank you all for that, and for the future phases of this package as they come forward in consideration of us. My question is, if you would, to tell us just generally about the Families First and CARES Act, and what are some of the provisions that you think are most valuable in helping all of us as Americans weather this pandemic?
Congressman Burchett.
I'm having difficulty. What was the first part of that question?
Just to tell us generally about the Families First and CARES Act, an overview, and then what are some of the provisions that you think are most valuable to all of us as Americans?
Okay. Well, the Paycheck Protection Program, of course, it protects our workers, of course, from being laid off. And, of course, the workers still get a paycheck to provide for their families. Of course, I keep asking, a lot of these, they get a paycheck, but there's nothing open. You know, people are having trouble in some areas of getting supplies. And, you know, the loans to small business or be forgiven if they retain the staff, which I think is imperative. I've heard from so many people in businesses that are just, you know, their business is their family. I mean, they're so close to their people and they're worried about them. They call me late at night, and, you know, we've heard a lot of the problems with the rollout. We've been working with the SBA and Treasury to resolve those problems. You know, you see Mnuchin on television, Secretary of the Treasury. The reality is, I mean, he literally has put people in touch with us to where when there's problems, we've been able to address them specifically. And I think they said they had 800 banks. My other congressman can correct me. I think they said they had 800 banks that they personally reached out to from Congress people calling them. And, you know, I know it's super scary and it's stressful for all our business owners. And of course it's tough on the banks too. And they're working with our federal agencies. There was a big problem there. And now it seems like the resources are available for our local folks. And we've been pushing, this delegation has been pushing, I know, to get access to all that as soon as possible. Did that answer anything?
Yes, sir. That was good. Very good. Congressman Desjardins?
Yeah, I concur. I think that it just is hopefully going to give people peace of mind that we're going to get through this. As Phil Rowe said, we had a problem with finding workers just a few weeks ago, and now we have people, you know, trying to file for unemployment, wondering when those checks will come, because most small businesses don't have the capital, you know, to make those payrolls, you know, beyond a month without getting bridge loans and things like that. So, you know, this is getting out the door relatively quickly. Hopefully, you know, it'll be in time. And, you know, the nice thing is for these business owners, when they use this money for rent or for payroll, it shifts from being a loan to a grant, so they don't have to pay this money back. And Mnuchin this morning was talking about how we want to get everybody included in this, everyone that has a small business, sole proprietorship. They're working on the 1099 status. We might have an update on that by the end of the day. Again, I'd encourage people to go to the SBA.gov or Treasury.gov under frequently asked questions, because people have a lot of them, and they're updating that every day. Student loans have been deferred for several months, so you know, that'll help. Hopefully some of these personal checks, the $1,200 will be hitting the bank if you filed electronically on your tax return in 2018 or 2019, and they have that information. You might see, you know, the $1,200 check per person, 24 per couple, with 500 per child, up to an income of 75,000 for single, and up to 150,000 for a couple. And that tapers off as you go up, but those checks could start hitting the banks by the end of next week, according to the update we got today. So that'll give some initial relief, maybe while we're waiting for some of these loans to finalize. But I think, you know, the people should know, and the chamber should know, as we encourage these small businesses and sole proprietors and folks that just hang in there. Help's on the way. You know, we're already looking at getting backup funds if what we've already pushed out is going to be inadequate. Apparently, they've already, I can't remember the exact number, somebody can help me with it, but it seems like they've already got $100 billion out, or there's $100 billion in waiting and $70 billion out, but it's getting a huge response, as you can imagine. And, you know, we're working every day. We're all working together and stay in touch in communication, federal, state, and local governments to try to help everyone get through this. And I'll stop there.
Congressman Fleischman?
Okay, thank you. That's my buddy Phil Rowe you're showing now. He's a lot more handsome than I am. But I will agree with what my colleague said. Let me say this. We passed 3 bills. under a tremendous amount of economic pressure, under a crisis situation. By and large, what those bills were intended to do was to deal with the healthcare part of the crisis, which was real, which is in fact real, and then the economic side of that. Clearly, when we put these together, we wanted to bring the most help to the most people as quickly as possible. There are going to be some logistic issues with that. We're seeing them come out. Hopefully in future bills, which I agree with my colleagues, we will see additional funding, especially for the entrepreneurs, for the small businesses who desperately need this. But as we work through this process, hopefully we can target the aid even better. There are some affected industries we're hearing from, particularly restaurants and some of the hospitality folks who feel that this is not addressing all of their needs. So we're being very solicitous of their thoughts. But by and large, given the constraints that we were faced with, it was a good package and it is working. Thank you.
Congressman Rowe.
Bradley, I think if you're a businessman or businesswoman out there and you've seen your cash flow go, and remember, this is what happened to people through no fault of a business and through no fault of any employee. You walk up one day and we say, your restaurant's closed, don't come to work. Normally you'll get a 2-week notice to lose your job or be laid off. It was, in a restaurant business, just don't show up tomorrow. So it was a great shock to people. Fortunately, I think we're going to come out of this pretty quickly. And I really do believe that. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned is next fall, when we're all hopefully getting ready to go watch some football and get our kids back in school again, I think one of the things that we've got to look at is, will there be a second wave of this? And I think certainly if the coronavirus is around, like bad colds are, which is a coronavirus, there will be another outbreak of this, but I don't think it'll be nearly as severe. And the idea is, if it's not, then our hospitals can handle that, and we can go along using the things we've learned right now to help minimize this. We've also working on, believe me, very smart people are working on medicines to treat this as we speak. We're working as fast as can be for vaccines so that people will have that protection next year. So there are a lot of things that are going on right now to help mitigate what may be in the fall. People think, well, if I get on my feet now, what's going to happen in September, October, November when seasonal flu comes back again. So I think those things are important. As Chuck said, and Scott went over it very, very well, as did Tim, the Congress, I have never seen in my 12 years there anything come by this quickly. Remember, the SBA was set up to issue about $25 billion worth of loans in a year. And in 4 days, they've issued however much money has gotten out, plus how much is pending that's going out the door. They're literally going to, in the next couple of 3 weeks, get $500 billion of loans out, needed loans out to people. So there are going to be some hiccups in this, and certainly people will just be patient. Secretary Mnuchin is working night and day. I give him nothing but a great big shout out and his team for them trying to get these resources out to people in need.
Thank you very much. We'll go to our second question. Amy Nolan with the Knoxville Chamber.
Efforts have worked. We have heard from a lot of businesses that there's just been a.
Amy, can you start your question over again? I think you were muted in the beginning.
Oh, sure. Sure. Okay. Again, I want to add my thanks to the congressman. I believe your efforts are certainly working. We're hearing from members that it's a sea change as far as banks responding and applying for PPP loans, and they're feeling much better about it today than they were Monday, and certainly much better than last Friday. So thank you for your efforts. Now, as we move, Congress has been very active on the relief packages, as we hopefully will soon move into recovery. Can you talk about some, Congressman Burchett, I believe you touched on it, tax credits, some of the things that you're interested in seeing in recovery packages as Congress moves forward.
Congressman Burchett. We may have lost him. We can circle back. Congressman Desjardins.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we got you. Okay.
Okay, sorry, my daughter's not here. She's 12. She would gladly fix this for me. I would hand her the phone, and she would just look of disgust. She would type 300 things into it and hand it back to me like didn't know what I was doing, which I don't. But yeah, I am really, really concerned. You know, when we talk about socialism, I don't overemphasize this. There's a group of folks that really would like to see us a socialist society. They want government-owned business. They want it all. And my biggest fear is if we're not careful, we'll have done more to advance that cause than anything else. And I hope that, and I've stressed this with the administration and our leadership, that we put some good ideas and some good legislation forward, because we cannot continue to pay people not to work. This is an emergency situation through no fault of their own, but this is not sustainable. The amount of money that we're putting into this is just not sustainable. And so I would like to see tax credits for business investment. I would like them to get just very creative, maybe some rollback on business taxes. That's going to have to happen at some of the state and local levels. And I just think if we're all in this together, then dadgummit, let's start acting like it. And let's realize that small business is what turns this country. And until we get that through our head, I'm afraid this thing could drag on. And I'm like Dr. Rowe. I think we're going to come out of this thing strong. I think our economic bones are good and strong. And I think that we're going to be in good shape. But we've got to have those plans in place, and we've got to roll back some more of these taxes and things that are egregious especially on small business and the bureaucracy. Because this has got to be just like, I compare it to just right after the Second World War. Of course, I wasn't alive then, but these folks would come in, and these servicemen like my father came home from the war, and if there was not they had the GI Bill, they could go to school. There was a plan in place. And I hope we're not just saying, wow, the virus is over, everybody get back to work. And it's just not going to happen. And so I've stressed that. I've talked to people that are very successful in our community that are afraid that they, in fact, are going to lose everything they've had. I spoke with Bob Corker multiple times, and he talked about, this is generational wealth that is being erased just overnight. And I think we need to realize that, and we need to address it. And I would hope government could support and get out of the way and let this economy churn back up into the plus sign. But, that's maybe a little oversimplification. Sorry, I went to preaching.
No, thank you very much. Congressman Desjardins.
Bradley, I believe Congressman Desjardins had to jump on an ag committee call.
Okay. Congressman Fleischman.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. When we come out of this crisis, health side and the economic side, I think we're going to need to get back to some of the basics that we were seeing in place before the crisis hit. Lower regulations, low taxes. We're going to have to be very careful as we take this economic patient and bring it forward, if you will, into a recovery that we hope will be meaningful and robust. As we look at this, I think it's going to be very important, and we're seeing this already. Kudos, I want to thank Governor Lee. He stopped what they were doing on the state budget, and they're going to reassess that. That's very important. So whether you're at the local level, the state level, or the federal level, we're going to have to be very careful as we see this economy come back to do the things under the free market system, under the free enterprise system that will incentivize it. So we're probably going to see not only tax credits, but hopefully investment credits. Find ways that it'll be easier to get capital flowing into industries that have been affected, maybe some form of a voluntary national campaign to get people to go back out and eat in restaurants and visit hotels and travel and tourism to build back this industry, to build back this country. We've got to be very careful. And I think Tim is right. If we are not careful, the left will try to continue to drive us in a position where they'll see more federal regulations, higher taxes. We can't tax or regulate out of this. We're going to have to grow out of this. And the best way to grow, I think, is to allow businesses to do what they've done best in the past before this crisis.
Thank you. Congressman Rowe?
And Brad, this is pretty simple. We're going to come out of this when people feel safe. When people, families, when moms and dads feel like it's okay to go take their kids out to eat or go to a ball game, or I know that if we tee the ball up at Neyland Stadium the first weekend in September, we're going to be fine. That stadium is full of people feel safe to go there. There are some businesses, unfortunately, I think that are not going to make it, that really will not survive. Maybe a small restaurants or a small family business. I think Senator Corker is absolutely right about that. You will see some of those not survive. Most will, I think. And as we come out of it, as we do, as people feel better, they'll come out and start spending their money. And specifically in Sevier County, I go back to them again. The state depends tremendously on them for sales tax revenue. So local governments, state governments, schools, all this are going to be affected by the retail. And it's interesting, you see some businesses that are absolutely thriving during this time. If you look at carryouts, I know in Powell's is a restaurant chain up here where I live, and they're doing pretty well. Many of the other businesses, your Walmarts and your grocery stores, they can't. I mean, Food City can't get the shelves stocked. They leave it in a box on the floor because they're so busy. They can't find enough people to do that. So the other thing that I've seen happen, Bradley, in this, which is not necessarily bad. Let's look at healthcare for just a minute. One of the things we put in this bill temporarily, but I hope it is a permanent thing, is the telehealth. We now have an ability with our telehealth is to be able to get out into people's homes and provide care for them so they don't have to come out where they are at risk. Emergency room visits are actually way down because people are afraid to go to the ERs. I got put in that bill where a doctor or a nurse practitioner could actually, as they talk on the phone to someone, because many people in rural America don't have access to internet, and they can use their telephone. We actually during this time can do that, so providers can be compensated and patients can get care. So there are going to be some good things. We are going to come out of this. How we're going to look like on the other side, history will show. But America is strong. I absolutely trust the free market system. What you're seeing now was public-private partnerships. When you look at testing, the CDC couldn't do that. And that was one of the things that my doctor colleague said to me the other day. If we can get two things, you should see two here, two things to happen where point-of-care testing for this coronavirus and enough protective equipment, PPEs for us, we can go back to work. So we're going to have to open all of those things up sooner rather than later, and I think we will, to get our businesses back up and going. Safety is the main thing. People feel safe, they'll go out.
Thank you very much. Third question, Laura Barnett with the Kingsport Area Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you all. I just want to echo the sentiments of Amy and Beth that you all are participating on this call today. I think more than anything, our chamber members and our businesses just want to be reassured. And as Congressman Rowe said, we are going to come out on the other side of this, hopefully in the near future. But in the near future, as businesses will be looking for ways to move forward, reopen, normalize operations, do you have any insights that may be used as businesses begin to turn their attention to that?
Congressman Burchett.
Yeah, Congressman Rowe referred to, this thing could be coming back again. He and Desjardins are two doctors. And I'm sorry if you hear any noise in the background. My dog over here is snoring. he's not too stressed out over this. But anyway, yeah, I really, I'm worried about it coming back around again in the fall. You know, and businesses are going to have some new guidelines for keeping the workplace healthy once they resume operations. Of course, we've called on the Trump administration, the CDC, start drafting some public health guidance for when the nation reopens. I keep saying, when we get back, we got to be ready. We got to hit boots on the ground, and we need to know that these places are safe and people can resume their daily lives. And specifically, I think businesses need things like the employees should cover their face, do those things that maybe now are social distancing or whatever. And I would hope that we could get those guidelines out and that they would be in place. And I don't know about enforcement. I worry about that, the heavy hand. I think a gentle suggestion kind of works best for a lot of this. But I'm kind of a libertarian when it comes to businesses and the way they operate, and people need to be able to do their thing. And, you know, you're not going to see you're going to say social distancing, and then you're going to see somebody see a football game, and which I'll be there, of course. And I'm sure several of you all will too. I know Chuck will probably be there as well. Neyland Stadium, and there's not going to be any social distancing there. And I don't know how you're going to keep from it. You know, we're just going to have to, a lot of common sense is going to have to enter into it. But those guidelines, I think, for small business are going to be good. And I think our health departments, our county health departments are going to be at a very pivotal point in what they do if they can get that word out to our businesses and help them comply with some of those.
Thank you. Congressman Fleischman.
Well, thank you. And yes, Tim, I am going to be there rooting on the Big Orange, and I know you will be as well. Another asset I think that we need to be looking at and be thankful for, it's in my district, a lot of Tim's constituents work there, is the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Right now, because of their supercomputer ability, which is the best in the world, the fastest and smartest supercomputers in the world, we have Summit. We are actually building the next generation, which will be Frontier, which will be an exascale computer to handle these difficult computational problems. What that means is we will take the data that we've been able to glean from this very difficult time, put it in there, and come up with solutions so we're better able to deal with it in the future. In addition to that, there's going to be a lot of medical research done there and the like. So coming out of this, again, it's almost analogous to a patient. We want to make sure that we get the patient well and then get the patient out there and make sure that we do everything possible to get our vibrant economy back again. And I'm going to say this, because of the groundwork that was laid in terms of lower taxes, lower regulation, which all of my colleagues on this call participated in with the administration, we're going to be in a much better position, I think, to get into a recovery mode. Thank you.
Congressman Rowe.
Bradley, just to finish up, they summarized it very well. Again, when people feel safe, they'll come out back to restaurants and Cracker Barrel and wherever they go eat. And when they feel like that their families are not at risk. I think it's been interesting to watch this, to see which industries a lot of manufacturers have continued working. Now, that's going to slow up. And one of the things we haven't talked about that I'm going to really work on is to reorganize our supply chain. Almost 100% of our gloves that we use in the operating room come from Malaysia, overseas. 90% of some ingredient in a medicine that we take originates from China. We have to reorganize that, and we don't have to have it all produced here. You just have to have some percent of these vital medicines produced here so that production can be ramped up, whether it's gowns, masks, whatever it may be. We shouldn't be running short of masks. I practiced over 30 years and don't remember ever running out of a mask, and all of a sudden now we are. So we need to relook at that as a country after we do an after-action report when this is all over and done. And I'm going to say this once again. we're America, we're a capitalist country. And I looked at these data on healthcare, Bradley, and at the end of the day, you're going to see this system right here perform much better than any social world, I can tell you, with outcome. We have dedicated hospital people, and I'm going to say this: when we determined what was essential in this country, our governors and others said this is an essential person. Let me tell you what wasn't essential. What wasn't essential was an actor in a movie, because we close the movie theaters. So the loudmouth actors that pontificate all the time, it turns out they're not very essential. The highly paid athletes, we don't have. Look, I am a huge sports fan. I've been to over a dozen Final Fours. I've had to go through the 12-step program in March because we didn't have basketball tournament. But it was exactly the right thing to do. And all these high-paid sports people, they're not essential. But the person cleaning your room at the hospital is, the person serving you food at the hospital, the doctors and the nurses and the other people there that are taking care of our health, they are essential. And I want to finish by thanking those and all those small businesses that feed them, that supply them, the EMT, the EMS people that are out there picking people up and taking them down to the ER. Thank you for that. I want to personally, I worked in the hospitals for years, but I want to thank all those people who made it possible for me to carry out my job. And I think you're going to see, Bradley, the best outcomes in the world in this country when it's all said and done. And finally, for all you business people out there, there's the sun's going to shine again. It's going to come out again. This is America. We always figure it out, and we'll figure this out.
Well, thank you, Congressman Rowe. And that concludes our questions, our prepared questions. And we do have a couple. If we have time to get to more, then we certainly will. I'm Ryan King with the Tennessee Chamber. And it looks like our first question is from the Oak Ridge Chamber. Parker, if you could, just make sure you're unmuted and go ahead and ask that question.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Bradley, for hosting this, and appreciate our congressional delegation being open to this conversation. I'm going to be very direct. It's been touched on by Bradley at the beginning of the meeting. As we come out of this business, my local arts council, a 501c3 corporation, has their paychecks protected. But I don't see businesses coming to the arts council to ask for help when we try and come out of the other side of this thing. I see over 100 chambers of commerce in Tennessee and over 5,000 chambers of commerce in America that are excluded from participating in the payroll protection plan. And I'd like to know if there's a step when we move forward under which 501c6 corporations will be included in this, and what your individual views are on that issue.
Gentlemen, please go ahead in any order now. And if you feel like the questions has been adequately answered by another congressional member, please go right ahead.
This is Phil. I don't mind starting with that.
Sure.
This is a $2.2 trillion program that was negotiated. And when it got to the 501c3 and 501, I think the 19s, it was negotiated. Quite frankly, we didn't want the Kennedy Center with $25 million who laid off everybody there. I thought that was inappropriate. NPR, I like NPR, but there were things in that happened just because of a negotiation. I personally had absolutely no problem, including the chambers. They're small businesses just like I ran for 30 plus years. Whether that'll change in the next tranche or not, what we're trying to do with small business is to add this $250 billion with nothing else added, because once you start that flower planting, everybody has their special interests that they want in there. So that's how I saw it, and maybe Tim or Chuck can chime in and see if they saw it differently. But basically, that's why it ended up like it was.
A great point, Congressman Fleischman. I agree totally with what Phil just said. This was negotiated. Unfortunately, the C6s should have been included. They were not. This was not a perfect bill. It would be my hope that in any future package, we address this need to include them, in addition to targeting some of the things that have been missed in a package this large, put together this quickly, some of the best intentioned, well-intentioned aid that was set out there is not hitting the target. We've got to do a little bit better job in refining that. But Parker, to answer your question, the C6s should have been in.
Thank you. So I'm going to presume that means an effort will be made to get us in?
Yes.
Exactly. Here's the problem. We have one group that is very pro-business, and we have another group in the U.S. Congress that's less pro-business. So that was what the negotiation was. I'll give you an example. What Chuck just said. Look, we've got a lot of small liberal arts colleges in the 1st Congressional District, and throughout Tennessee and throughout the country. Many of them were excluded because they went over 500 employees, because they counted their students who had work study. Well, they're not really employees of the university. They have a work study, may be provided by private dollars, it may be by federal dollars. But many of them got kicked out of the same problem you were. They got left out just because of that. So there are a lot of little things that we put together in this bill so quickly. I'm surprised it's actually worked as well as it had. And you knew you were not going to get everything right in something went this quick. It never went through a subcommittee, committee, floor debate, House over to the Senate, fully debated. This happened at light speed.
Thank you, Congressman. And speaking of higher ed, which you touched on there briefly, I think we've got Lou Hanneman on also from THEC. Lou, if you could please unmute your line, and you'll be live.
Ryan, thanks. I appreciate that, and thank you to the Chamber for giving me this opportunity, and thanks especially to the delegation for being on the call, but also for everything else you've done. So, in the CARES Act, as it's being called, there was a significant amount of money for higher education institutions to be reimbursed for lost revenues due to refunds and financial aid loss and things of that nature. You know, as we look forward to maybe the next stimulus package, but also the recovery, you know, has there been any thought given to how higher education can begin to intersect more aggressively with industry, with the workforce through apprenticeship grants, funds that might be in a subsequent package? Any other thoughts on collaboration, both in terms of research with the government, but also perhaps with industry specifically?
Well, I'll take a shot at that. I'm on the Education Committee, and I've certainly been very supportive. I went to a Board of Regents school, Austin P, and then got a doctorate and postdoctorate from UP. So believe me, I spent many more years in a seat in a classroom than I ever thought I would when I was growing up. But the apprenticeships, we are 100%. And I want to give our state a shout out, and you all at the state level. Every state in the union looks at Tennessee about what we're doing in education. How in the world can a state like ours, it doesn't have a New York financial center, provide free community college and basically last dollar coverage at the THECs, at the technical centers. And also a shout out to Randy Boyd, and I think Middle Tennessee State does it too, that if your family makes under $50,000 a year, you can, the last dollar that's not covered by the Hope Scholarship or whatever, that will be covered. So there are no economic barriers now for lower income people to go to school. We certainly know, we've heard it until 3 weeks ago, we heard we don't have the skilled people to fill our jobs. And I know that NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, I was at a meeting with them in Washington not too long ago, and they talked about by 2028, there being 8 million new manufacturing jobs. So this president has really emphasized bringing manufacturing back into this country. And I know you're very familiar with the Perkins apprenticeships and scholarships that we work with. I think you could see those, not in this 4th tranche, but just in the appropriations process. Remember, we've got a budget we've got to get together with all of this. By October 1, we have to have a federal budget put together.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Rowe. And we do have one more question, actually a very good question that has been on the front of mind for a lot of businesses, from Drew McDonald. Drew, if you're out there, please unmute your line and you'll be live. Drew? Okay, I can ask Drew's question for him, and I'm sure you've gotten this question several times. Has Congress considered modifying the $600 unemployment with a cap, which there was a proposed amendment in the Senate, because some workers could potentially make more money sitting at home, and that could potentially slow a restart of the economy?
I'll be glad to take a shot at that question and then defer to my colleagues. This is Chuck Fleischman. We were watching as the Senate had 4 Republican members quarantined. Therefore, they did not have the votes to block this, despite the fact that they tried. I cannot think of anything that is more of a disincentive. And I've heard from factories in Scott County, I've heard from local businesses who have said, my gosh, how could this have ever happened? Because now for 39 weeks, we're going to have some workers who literally will be at home making more than they would have if in fact they were employed. And it has caused a lot of problems and some envy. Some of the workers who actually stayed on the job and are working and are still working are in a very difficult position because of this. The employers are upset. So that should have never been in the law. Unfortunately, it was there. They didn't have the numbers to block it, and we had to get it passed. So I would hope that we would look at incentives to have people work. Sometimes we've seen through the appropriation process that I was involved in, hazard pay for example, some of the federal workers who are exposed and things like that. I want to see us incentivize work in this country, not de-incentivize it. But I was saddened to see that put into the law, but it became part of it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump off and let Tim finish it up. I agree with Chuck. It just something that, again, this was negotiation that we talked about. The $600 bump up goes for 16 weeks. There's another of the 26 that you get under law now that the state administers. Another 13 was added by the federal government, but not the $600. So hopefully we'll get our folks back to work. It is a disincentive to work, and we don't need that. And that was brought up today when we had our meeting with the National Chamber. I was on a phone call just before this one with the National Chamber, and they've got a lot of good information. I know you all do, Brad, at the state level, but the National Chamber has a lot of good information, frequently asked questions that they can help answer.
Thanks, Congressman Rowe. And one last quick question, one final question. Do you have any information about a potential infrastructure bill, something about highway funding as part of a recovery package?
Yeah, I'll attempt that. I talked to a group of our folks in the area that are in that industry. There's a lot of talk of that, and they were trying to make, some folks were talking about making that part of package 4 or whatever, but Leader McCarthy, and I think he's correct, has stated that he didn't want to, let's see what we got right now. Let's see with the package that we passed. Let's see how it's implemented. Let's see how it works out before we jump on anything else. I'm afraid what we do is we try to rush it, and we would get less than what we need for the infrastructure. We all know that that's a problem. We've got to address it, and putting our head in the sand is not going to help. But rushing it, I think we could, as we used to say in the state Senate, let's go a little slower. We'll get there a little faster. I think everybody realizes we need it. But if we were to try to push it as part of this or one of these packages, I think we could miss something. We would leave the electric grid out. We would leave something that's vital to Oak Ridge, which is vital to Chuck and myself district, or just something along that line. So I think we need to do that separate. That's my thought.
Thank
Tim,
you.
I totally agree. This is Phil. I totally agree with you on that. It is vitally important that we do that. And the president makes a good point. Look, I look at deficit spending, and basically all you're doing when we look at these budget deficits that we have is if you're just mortgaging your children and grandchildren's future, somebody's going to pay those bonds back. The president makes the point of, when have we ever been able to borrow money to build something that, like roads, bridges, as he mentioned, maybe the electric grid, whatever it may be, investment in technology that will help future generations. I, as a city commissioner and as a mayor of Johnson City, I never like borrowing money for a school. Well, okay, we had a 20-year bond to pay that school off, but a future generation got the benefit of that school. If I built a bridge or a road here that I had to borrow money for to build it, yeah, but they got to help pay it back also. So I think what he was saying as a builder, it does make a little sense to borrow money at almost 0% and pay it back when you can get the advantage of we need it. Whether airports, I was reading I-81, if you've driven that very often, and I have to sometimes driving back to Washington, 12 or 13% of the GDP of the United States of America go just 4-lane road up Roanoke, Virginia, up there, Salem. There's a truck station where you go through and weigh. And it's every few seconds a truck on an 18-wheeler on both sides of the road go through there. It is woefully inadequate. If you have the least fender bender, it takes hours to get up that road. It's almost not passable now in some parts of the day. So I think Tim is right. I think we do need to do it. We just need to do it a little slower on this one because it does need a lot of thought, but it needs to be done.
Well, thanks, Congressman Rowe. That's our time for the day, and we do have a couple more questions. Unfortunately, we can't get to quickly. Guys, we've got some of the best staffs in your office across of anyone in the country. If lots of your constituents are on the call here, how do they get in touch with you with, I'm sure, any questions they would have?
Yeah, I know Tim's got a good staff. He stole one of my best ones when I'm retiring this year. So I know he's got.
You blinked, Doc. I took him. That's what happened. Snooze, you lose. Now, if anybody needs us, please office 523-3772. If somebody doesn't pick up, it's going to go to voicemail. And I've got an excellent staff. As Dr. Rowe stated, I stole one of his best employees, and he's doing excellent work. But we're on it like a cheap suit, and I would appreciate any calls.
We're at area code 423-756-2342. 756-2342.
We good?
Very good. Well, thanks everyone for your time here, and I hope you have a great day, and thanks for your service.
And I hope that nobody took any screenshots of us, because these are definitely not the most flattering pictures I've ever seen of myself. And I'm a handsome man. You can ask Rowe. And Chuck Blythe will tell you I'm very handsome.
Amen.
All right. See you, boys.
Thanks,
I got to roll.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Yep. Bye-bye.